During version 4's announcement, the special program gave mention to a unique exploration mechanic related to Fontaine, the arc system consisting of two special properties, Numa and Dosia. While they presented an integral aspect of exploration throughout Fontaine, from a combat perspective, aside from a few niche interactions, the practical strength of characters hailed from Fontaine was not at all influenced by those mechanics. For the most part, they would contribute a tiny increase in damage that specifically interacts with certain enemy mechanics. For example, the Coppelius boss could have their cryo shield instantly broken when struck by an Osea attack. It was a convenience meant to encourage the use of Fontainian units. However, by and large, you could easily navigate your way through all facets of the region without really even being aware of the existence of the arc system. Natlan presents an exclusive combat and exploration mechanic of its own, the Nightsoul's Blessing, only this one has a lot more influence on both core aspects of Genshin Impact. Though we have only 2 playable units so far, with Kanisha on the way, because of its greater involvement within Molani and Kachina's kits, along with it being present beyond characters, early as it may be, I think we're getting a rather clear picture as to what the future meta is going to be for version 5, and to be honest with you, I can't tell if it's explicitly a good or bad direction to take because there are pros and cons to this approach. Today's video will be a discussion on region locking, how it's being instituted throughout Natlan, and what are some possible consequences of this, positive and negative. Region locking is a mechanic you see every so often, and the intentions behind it along with its execution can be an essential component to enhancing a game's experience or resulting in the complete downfall of it. Conceptually, the key merit of making a content region exclusive is that it can break the monotony of games, particularly that of live service games. For many, they enjoy the process of starting fresh, like the type of player who starts a new Minecraft world every time they come back to it instead of continuing where they left off. In MMOs, you can usually find that supposed fresh experience by starting a brand new character or class, notably if you're attempting some sort of Iron Man challenge, or like how the Nuzlocke playstyle has become more and more popular throughout the Pokemon community. Region locking is one such variant of the experience of starting anew, only it's without having to make a brand new account for everything. From one area to another, Mondstadt to Liyue to Inazuma to Sumeru to Fontaine, the experience of Genshin has been a cumulative journey, collecting more resources and acquiring new characters as you travel from one area to the next. And while that still applies to Natlan, it's not like you're completely unable to use your existing party, a number of things have been made present that encourage the use of native characters, far more than what has been present before. Obviously in Sumeru there were many things that incentivize the use of Dendro characters and the aforementioned arc system for Fontaine, but Natlan has taken things much further in that respect. Exploration-wise, let's talk a bit more about Nightsoul. Characters from Natlan can utilize what's called phlogiston engraving to gain special properties while traveling through the area. As an example, Molani's surfing ability can last significantly longer when using her Night Realm's gift passive, wherein she can replenish her Night Soul points. Furthermore, while moving on water or lava, the rate of depletion for Night Soul and phlogiston is much less while inside Natlan as opposed to when surfing outside, which makes it obvious that Molani's not going to be able to surf as long in Fontaine, Sumeru, Inazuma, or the like, especially considering there's no lava in any of those regions. Though I wouldn't call this game breaking, the intention is self-evident. Molani's meant to be played in Natlan, and primarily within Natlan. With a similar Nightsoul-oriented mechanic being present in Kachina's kit, it's safe to assume most if not all Natlan characters will have this gameplay element, making their respective means of travel not as efficient when used outside of their homeland. It doesn't outright disable us from using them not within Natlan, but the loss of efficiency is enough to matter. The exact numbers escape me, but I believe Molani can only surf for like 8 seconds in other regions as opposed to over 20 seconds in Natlan. Now you guys know that exploration is secondary on this channel. I like to mainly zero in on the combat aspects. As covered before, this isn't the first time an external system exclusively affected a group of characters, but while arc alignment does give you some special perks when fighting Fontainian enemies, the advantage isn't so big that alternatives are suddenly made irrelevant. It's unclear as to what extent Hoyo plans to make region locking affect the game, but it is shaping to be a measurable extent. Character-wise, again it's just Kachina, Molani, and Kanish, but Kachina notably has a passive that gives her bonus geo damage when a nearby party member triggers a Night Soul burst, implying that, among other reasons, she wants to be paired up with her fellow companions. Kanish has something similar too. One of his passive talents also entails a party member triggering a Night Soul burst. Obviously they don't have to explicitly be paired up with other Natlan units as they can just do it themselves, but the point still stands, they're trying to push mono Natlan parties. If that wasn't evidence enough, consider the new equipment we have. Doubtless all of us have been farming the new artifacts within Sanctum of Rainbow Spirits. For the uninitiated, the first 2 sets of version 5.0 are the Skull of the Hero of Cinder City and the Obsidian Codex. These 2 artifacts currently rank among the best in the game, offering bonuses that make previous overpowered artifact sets look mid in comparison. Starting with Cinder City, the 2-piece bonus is a serviceable battery component, generating 6 particles whenever a Night Soul burst is triggered. A Night Soul burst happens whenever Natlan characters and only Natlan characters deal elemental damage. Depending on the number of Natlan party members, the cooldown of said burst can be as high as 18 seconds or as low as 9 seconds. Just the 2-piece bonus alone is a clear indication that this artifact set can only be fully optimized when using a party consisting of no less than 3 Natlan characters, but it goes beyond that. The 4-piece bonus is beyond insane. You guys remember Kazuha, right? The guy who gives the entire party bonus elemental damage for basically existing? At 1k elemental mastery, that amounts to 40%. Well, the 4-piece bonus of Cinder City grants the entire party 12% bonus elemental damage whenever triggering a reaction for the elemental types involved in that reaction. So hypothetically, if you have this set on a Dendro character and you trigger Bloom, then the entire party deals bonus Hydro and Dendro damage. Additionally, if the equipping character is a Nightsoul Blessing, the party gets an extra 28% for a grand total of 40% bonus elemental damage for all party members lasting 20 seconds. Kazuha's passive only runs for 8 seconds. This is incredible, not only because the equipping character can trigger this off-field, but because it can boost the damage of multiple elements at the same time, even including that of Dendro, Geo, and Anima, which are not considered for things like Virtus and Venera or Kazuha's passive, under the sole condition that the only units who can actually acquire that 40% bonus are Natlan characters. Unless hereafter they release units not from Natlan who can obtain Nightsoul Blessing, which I highly doubt they will, only Natlan characters can use this set. As for Obsidian Codex, it too can only be utilized by Natlan characters. The 2-piece affords you a 15% increase in damage while on Nightsoul Blessing, self-explanatory but substantial for a 2-piece set. Then, if you consume Nightsoul points, the 4-piece bonus gives you effectively permanent 40% crit rate since Natlan units will be consuming Nightsoul at all times. This artifact set is Marshal Se Hunter on steroids, but once again, you can only use this on Natlan characters. Region locking extends beyond artifacts too. Weaponry is also involved. Take the new 4-star Chainbreaker bow. This one flat out says, for every party member from Natlan who is a different elemental type from the equipping character, said character gains bonus attack. Now there have been weapons that tap into specific mechanics like the ones that came out that interface with Dendro reactions, but to my knowledge, the last and only time they made a weapon that expressly states you need a character from a specific region was the Lithic Blade from Liyue. On a side note, I remember they made a weapon for units who don't have an arc alignment to deal Numa or Sia damage. I think it was called Narcissus and Cruise. It would be helpful if Hoyo can release a weapon that gives the wielder the ability to enter Nightsoul Blessing or count as a Natlan character, but I digress. To be fair, when Arlecchino came out, there was that artifact set that involved Bond of Life, which has a similar context of catering towards a select group of characters. But considering Arlecchino hails from Snezhnaya and Clorandus Fontainian, I'm inclined to believe there's a possibility more than just Fontaine characters will have a Bond of Life mechanic. Regardless, this is the most amount of region-locked content we've ever seen. Is that a good or bad thing? It really depends. From my point of view, the jury's still out on whether you can definitively call this a good or bad thing. After all, Natlan just came out. Depending on how they go about it, this will either make Genshin more fun than ever or ruin the game. Not too long ago was Imaginarium Theater, which as you know was a very controversial release of the game due in no small part to the mandatory character requirement, putting pressure on players to pull for and or use characters they may not want to use. Granted, that's not the only problem with the game mode, but that character requirement has been cited for being exclusionary towards players who don't have that many units, whether it's because they can't afford to or because they've only been playing for a short while. Forced necessity is a way to balance out a character roster by creating more scenarios where even niche or suboptimal units can be desirable purely for the sake of there being no other option. But there's a difference between encouraging players to use certain characters and obligating them to do so. In light of Genshin's difficulty ceiling, even with the advent of World Level 9 not reaching a high enough point to require min-maxing like other gachas do, a common point I made in other videos is that there's no incentive to build characters or do anything more than the bare minimum because the game doesn't pressure you to. And while this technically constitutes pressure, the main downside of region locking is that it can be tiresome to have to build up an entire new lineup of characters just to be able to play comfortably in Natlan. Again, I'm not trying to say that non-Natlan characters are unusable in Natlan, but depending on how far they plan to go with the Nightsoul and mono-Natlan parties and whatnot, if the game's power scaling falls accordingly, it can be punishing for players who don't want to or can't afford to pull for an entire cast of units just to make a functioning party. For example, a huge reason why Mono Geo has not been a popular team comp even back when it wasn't half bad was because of the investment floor it had. You're essentially faced with a similar situation here. You need to pull for a brand new team, and some players just don't have the resources to do it very fast. My hope is that they're gonna shower us with a bunch of Natlan 4-stars quickly so that free-to-play players don't have to wait months just to get their first Natlan party. But that's where I find issue with this. Part of what drove excitement for new characters is how they affected older characters. When Dendro came out, people were excited to see how they would change Electro and Hydro. Not to mention it's easy to gear up just one character as opposed to 4. When all the best damage dealers came out, you had a team of supports on deck to get them going. Or vice versa, if a new top tier support came out, most players likely have at least 1 or 2 damage dealers to make use of them. This is the first time you have units that come out, but you don't have a best in slot party for them already. I suppose you can use Molani with Shangling or Farina or Kazuha and whatnot, but given the sheer power offered by the Natlan artifacts and the possible strength of future characters, I'm assuming previously existing supports are not going to constitute a best in slot. That alone can be a deal breaker. Maybe you want to pull from Mavuika, but you don't also want to have to pull 3 other units to complete your party. Bottom line, I would say the main downside to region locking is that gatekeeping players can be a turnoff. Perhaps for long-time players who are growing bored and want to try something different, they'll be cool with this. But for new players or those without the wherewithal to spend, the idea of characters being good only when paired with characters from the same region might not be too appealing to them compared to someone who can work with party members regardless of region. Mind you, combat efficiency is not compromised in any way. So far, the only part of Malani that's hindered is her exploration mechanics. She'll still be able to do her full DPS and stuff. Either way, I think depending on who you ask, the pressure to pull for a brand new squad of units all at once can be a bit jarring. Now, on the other hand, there might be a benefit to this approach, first and foremost being that it can be a way to encourage niche team compositions that don't outright power creep everyone else. A week or two ago, I made a video talking about how perceptions of Malani have been skewed by the fact that Novelet Jesus modes everything, begging the question, why would you ever pull for another Hydra unit? While I'm certain Novelet will still be more than useful when fighting across Natlan, giving mechanics that encourage Natlan units can allow for multiple top-tier performers to exist without having to power them all up Dragon Ball Z style. Over in Honkai Star Rail, they have a plethora of engines like follow-up attacks, damage over time, traditional hyper carry, super break, and counterattacks. At times, one engine may be slightly better than the others, but they all stay competitive with each other. Diversifying the number of ways you can go about combat is one way to control power creep, and in a way they were already doing that in Fontaine. Do I think making Natlan characters good only within the Natlan characters is a bit extreme? Possibly, but this enables units to have a chance to shine and not shining infesting every single party like a copy pasta. I feel like right now, Hoyo's in a situation where they're trying to market new characters to players, but they also don't want to go too crazy on one-upping one unit after another since other gachas do that and it tends to devolve into excessive power inflation. What's one way they can release a top-tier Dendro character who can match Alhaitham in usefulness without having to directly compete against him? By giving Kanish a unique niche of his own. Of course, this would have to be complemented by content released to motivate us to work on many units like how Star Rail has half a dozen endgame modes. It's all about perception and circumstance. Depending on who you ask, region locking's a way for players who have grown bored with doing the same monotonous routine over and over again to try something new because the game is actually making them try something new. At the same time, region locking can be suffocating for a player who might feel blindsided by the sudden demand for all the new stuff they had to work on. It's a fine line for them to tread. They want to encourage us to pull for and use new characters, but they also can't force us to play a certain way, especially if it differs from how we were expected to play in the past. Part of me believes this will be less tricky of a dilemma if they conduct a Genshin impact like this from the very start, region locking since Mondstadt. That they're adding this in right now is why I'm personally unsure about whether this is a good or bad thing. Again, on one hand it can be refreshing to try out a brand new party for a change, but on the other, if it reaches a point where you're forced to go that new party or risk falling behind, that can be unfair too. I will say however that region locking is extremely risky to do in a gacha since characters cost money. If it was a completely free-to-play game or buy and play like a Steam game or something and you have free access to all characters, then yeah, more power to them. But it's because we don't have free access to all characters that I can imagine this being interpreted as predatory. I would have no problem dropping everything and starting from scratch with every region if every character, including 5 stars, was grindable, but considering it can cost several hundreds of dollars to pull for even one character and their signature weapon, let alone 5 or 10, that's a bit much to ask. Now they can always alleviate this by giving us tons of free Natlan characters to play with. For instance, I really hope the Pyro Traveler can use Nightsoul and counts as a Natlan character. Or better yet, I hope the Traveler is actually good for once, because if we're expected to go mono Natlan teams, having a good free unit in the form of Pyro Traveler like how we had Harmony MC for Star Rail can be a great asset for that. But what do you guys think? Do you think Natlan having region exclusive mechanics is a good or bad thing for the game? I welcome you to share your thoughts in the comments. That's it for today though, so if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you love to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Natlan discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.